Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, wherever you are in the world. We've got lots of people joining us today from all parts of the globe, so it's brilliant to see you all here. And my name's Chris Anscombe, and I'm sort of acting as your host today. I'm working alongside my colleague Adrien, who in a moment will give you probably a bit more of a formal introduction. But if you can just bear with us for a moment, just while I share. Adrien, can you just let me know if everything is working as I start to share my screen?
I'll let you know.
Yeah, let's just try and get ourselves up and running. Okay, can you see the first slide?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant. Right then, well, Adrien, can I just pass over to you? And what we're going to do, we're going to have a bit of a conversation today, as we say. And so you might find we interrupt each other, we have a little chat along the way. But hopefully today you're going to find some really valuable information on the Real Leather Stay Different competition, but also some tips and knowledge about leather and leather in design. Anyway, sorry, Adrien, over to you.
Let's get to the first slide. So we've already mentioned who we are. And originally, I would say I'm a fashion designer. I spent over 40 years working with fashion design and international fashion education. And my focus is really on transforming the potential into professional outcomes of students. As a regular jury member, I've reviewed many submissions over the years. So I work with this project a lot. So I have a lot of experience in this project. I sometimes joke that I've gone from designing garments to designing designers. So that about sums me up. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, well, yeah, sounds like my name's Chris. I've got a completely different background to Adrien, although I've been in the industry a similar sort of length of time. I hate to say, but over 40 years. Um, I'm technically a leather technologist, but essentially I call myself a tanner. So I've learned actually how to make leather from all sorts of different animals for all sorts of different purposes. So I worked with garments, footwear, accessories, and so forth. Very much been involved in education over the years, and I'm now really happy to be involved in this project. We're being supported by the Leather and Hides Council of America, and essentially they are running the Real Leather Stay Different competition. But also, just to give you a little heads up, we're also working on another exciting project called the Leather Hub, where we're going to start providing a training platform, an online training platform, again, particularly with students in mind. So there'll be more to come on that. But really by the towards the end of the year, we should have a really excellent resource available for you as part of your studies. So back to you, Adrien.
So this part of the webinar, the first part is to understand Real Leather Stay Different competition and look at how we can align with the deliverables and what you're supposed to be doing to support your submission. We think it's very much an opportunity. This is quite a unique opportunity. We don't look just at the end result. We very much like to look at the product, and not just the product, but the way you've arrived at those ideas and your authenticity. So we'll be delving much more into that as we go through the webinar today.
And Adrien, can I just, because in the slide here it talks about the challenges of fast fashion versus, I suppose, slow fashion. How does the competition sort of fit with that?
Well, if we look at fast fashion, that's about trends and about passing ideas, which personally I'm not really a big fan of. If we're looking at real good leather design, it's about sustainability and lifelong products, products that aren't disregarded. They can be reused, cherished, repaired. Over many years. So we look at leather as a different part of the fashion industry, a special part of the fashion industry that has longevity.
Perfect. Yeah, I quite agree with you. Um, it's something we want to encourage, isn't it? So I
Yeah.
want a little bit more about the competition generally.
It's not simply a leather competition, it's an international competition focused on innovation, sustainability, material understanding, and creative thinking. So students from around the world can participate, meaning you're not only competing against your classmates or an institution. It's really an international festival for leather design.
And how many years has this been running now, Adrien?
Oh, good
Is this,
question. I
I think this is
think
the
is
sixth
it
year, isn't it?
four,
So say certainly, I think it's the sixth
six?
year and growing and growing, I think.
It's become quite huge now, and we can see the picture there. That's in Taipei, where we had the final last year.
Okay. So coming back to leather then, because that's really the key thing behind this, well, certainly the masterclass today, and the competition?
Well, leather is often misunderstood. The competition engages students to explore leather as a byproduct of the material with unique characteristics. It offers longevity, durability, repairability, emotional value, and offers a lifespan that extends beyond a synthetic alternative. Let's reject the plastic. The key is understanding both opportunities, responsibilities that come with using material and leather.
Okay, so what sort of product and what sort of categories? Talk here about the different categories. Would you like to explain that in a bit more detail?
So there are three categories: apparel, meaning fashion clothing, footwear, and accessories. It's important to understand all categories are judged equally. Only one submission per student. So choose your category carefully.
Okay, thank you. And this is probably a very essential thing to that the students understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So one rule that must never be overlooked is the material requirement. A minimum of 50% of cattle leather by surface area is required. Equally important, avoid unnecessary plastic components wherever possible. Always read the competition guidelines carefully. I would suggest perhaps a few times before beginning your design process or assembling your submission.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, so you said you're a member of the jury and have been for a number of years, Adrien. So, do you want to give us a little bit of insight into how you actually make the decisions as to who is going to be the winner in these categories?
So many students believe the competitions are judged purely on final image, which is completely wrong. It's not about the final image. What really wins the jurors over is looking at the strong design process. So that's really important for us. We want to see how have you arrived at your outcome, not simply the outcome itself. So we're not wanting to see a lookbook. We want to see a portfolio that's explaining the whole story. And we're going to talk about that today.
Okay, fantastic. And it says here they've got five core criteria. So I'm sure you're going to talk me through them, but do they all have equal weighting in
They
terms of
do.
importance?
They do.
Okay.
Individuality, concept, relevance, sustainability, and commercial understanding. We're going to talk about that each one separately now, but they all have equal understanding, equal weighting for the jury.
So you do really have to have a very balanced submission when you're entering this.
Yeah, it's about communicating your work well, which is partly why we're discussing this to make sure we get the best communication and you have the best opportunities to win or to participate well.
Okay. So can you take
So
me through those then? Thank you.
individuality is not just looking for copies of luxury brand. We're looking for your voice, what makes your perspective unique, what makes your approach different. Authenticity is often far more than powerful imitation. So clear voice, clear or authentic design identity is what we're looking for.
Okay. And what about the concepts then? How can you
Well,
give me a bit more on
every
this?
submission begins with a strong idea. However, the concept emerges from research and development rather than appearing suddenly. So the foundation would be research. The stronger the research, the stronger the outcome will be. So conceptualization coming from research and experimentation.
Can I put you? I know we've had a conversation where you say to me, "I don't like the word inspiration." Can you expand on that a little bit? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, I was inspired by whatever."
Yeah, yeah. How many hours do we have? Okay.
Yeah, that's a separate webinar probably on
In a
inspiration.
nutshell,
Uh,
because of the way that our world lives now, we both remember pre-digital age. But now, when students see an image on Instagram, that's their inspiration, and they work from there, or they see it on Pinterest, even worse, and they don't know where it's come from. Then it can be a starting point, but inspiration has become quite ephemeral. It doesn't mean much. Let's talk about research. You can talk about inspiration as your starting point, but then you've got to go and do the research, the big work, to look in depth at an area or many areas perhaps to build something worthwhile rather than just inspiration. I've kept it short.
well done. So leading into relevance then.
So, yeah, ask yourself, why does this project matter now? Why is this project interesting to you? How does it connect to contemporary culture, modern behavior, technology, sustainability, traditional craft even, and fashion in society. Is it fashionable object? Doesn't mean it's following trends, it means you're making trends. So design becomes more powerful when it responds to the world around it.
Excellent, thank you. And important, I mean, the word sustainability, we're hearing it all the time in all sorts of different ways. So how does sustainability fit with leather?
Well, let's get the word sustainability out properly. It's not a trend. It is responsibly making better choices. As simple as that. The world does not need any more humans. The world does not need any more clothes. But this is the world we're living in, and we're producing clothes, we're eating meat, and we're therefore producing leather. So judges are looking thoughtful material choices, transparency, know where your material comes from, circular thinking, perhaps your garment, or the bag can be upcycled later on, longevity, the garment or the item will have a long life, you can repair it, and making intelligent decision making. Does that sum it up for you? How do you think about
Yeah,
sustainability?
I quite agree. I mean, to me, leather is one of the original sustainable materials. If you think about it, we've always taken a waste product from, the food industry, as you mentioned, and we've added value to it. And rather than it just being going to waste, I think it's will put the whole concept. If you are working with an animal in this instance, you use every part and you add value to it, and you make a beautiful material which has a life of its own. It goes on to a second life, and I think that's, say, to my mind, leather is the perfect sustainable material for so many different reasons. So yeah, I just think, and to see that reflected in somebody's design is also critical, as they understand that and can demonstrate, I suppose, where it fits from that point of view.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
So what about commerciality then? Because it's all very well saying, this product's wonderfully sustainable, but if you actually can't, nobody wants it, let's be
Yeah.
honest, it's not got a
Well,
real future, has it?
even highly creative ideas must consider reality. So, who is the customer?
Mhm.
Would they want it? Could it be produced? Would it survive within a marketplace? Well, if it's couture, it's kind of very much a one-off item. But we're not really often creating couture shoes or a couture bag, although you could create a couture leather outfit, but it still needs to be directed at a consumer, whether it's one or whether it's 5,000.
Mhm.
So commercially understanding demonstrates maturity as a designer. Don't forget to show different proposals of your final idea. So here we can see, for example, a really fancy pair of shoes. But perhaps before the student arrived at idea, they had lesser complex ideas of that example. So you can show how your idea can have a variety of outcomes that
Mhm.
are less or strong, or more commercial in a way. So we can see that you have a commerciality
So can you
understanding.
almost show the evolution then? I mean, actually, from almost going from a really high, couture end
Yep.
into how you can take that down into a commercial high volume product. Is that
And
sort of,
I think this shoe is a really good example of that,
yeah?
because the shoe has some very strong aspects that you could easily water down. You could make it a flatter shoe with some similar aspects in it to show that
Mhm.
it can be look at different areas of the market rather than just being a one-off fantastic
One-off
shoe.
piece. Yeah. I mean, certainly these shoes have great impact, don't they? I mean, I say so. You sort of need that as well, don't you, to actually draw the yeah, to draw
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
customer in. But yeah, excellent. Thank you for explaining that better. So, in terms of then the deliverables, then would you like to just sort of run us through the? So you've spoken about a few of these
Yeah.
things, but a little bit more detail, perhaps.
So let's now look at what you really need to submit. Many students focus entirely, as we've said before, on the image of the final outcome, and the jury really needs to understand how you've got to that outcome. So think of submitting as telling a story.
Okay.
Every deliverable contributes to that story. So all the things we're asking for is all part of the story. And you can literally write those things down and tick them off as you go along. So if we get to the next slide,
Okay.
we
Yeah. So
now
these are all
look.
things now you're going to expect to see then within a submission, essentially.
We'd love to see a written summary, one that must understand and discuss all the parts of the written summary must or of the submission must be in there. It's your
What if
opportunity.
English isn't your first language, Adrian? Is that going to be a disadvantage?
Not really, not with technology. I mean, it's so easy to write something in one language and put it through AI or Google Translate and put it to another language, ask a friend to read it. Bullet points are excellent if you want to do bullet points. A lot of us are dyslexic or have other learning disabilities.
Mhm.
You're not being graded on your English. We're all looking at your communication skills, but language is not one of them. It's just there. The writing is to help us understand, and it should be pretty easy. So don't think of it as a tremendous task to do. You're not asked to write an essay. So it's a summary which will explain your research, how you've developed the ideas, and what the project, what the project is about, and how it's relative. How sustainability has informed your decisions, perhaps, and keep it
Mhm.
clear, concise, and design focused. So it doesn't have to be thousands of words. In fact, the shorter it is, the more
Shorter
the
and to the point,
difficult.
and just say
Because
using the thing of
we're
keep it simple, then really, isn't it?
we're going to read it much easier. If someone writes me
Yeah.
3,000 pages, I'm not going to read them all, and you're going to miss that
Mhm.
opportunity. So
Yeah, okay,
part of this is actually being an effective communicator.
thank you. So coming back onto, well, I noticed that you have the word here, mood, a mood board. Is that a little bit of a pet hate of yours, Adrian, I think?
You know it is the mood board. You know I hate them. So I'm calling it mood storyboard. So the mood boards are generally overused and overrated, but they are often what the first thing the judges will see. So a strong mood board is not a collection of beautiful pictures that you like. It can be carefully curated as a visual narrative to support your research, experimentation, and development of ideas. Think as it as a storyboard. So rather than just downloading images that everybody does, often the same images that you like, why don't you create an image like this, which is a collection of objects that tells us about proportion, materials, feel, and is creating a mood, but not from, you've created that mood yourself by collecting objects and photographing it. So if you want to do a mood board, create your own image. If not, create your own story from the research and your experimentation to create a storyboard that it works as a mood board and tells us everything about it. Don't forget, as with this presentation, even the typeface and the background color and the way it's positioned on the page is also creating a mood. So mood is in your whole presentation. So look at the idea of the mood as in the whole presentation. If it's going to be minimal or maximal, will be all be part of creating that feeling and understanding your design aesthetic.
Okay, I think we've got a little bit more on that as well, haven't we, to carry on that thing, how you
We
make
have.
something.
I know maybe I'm saying too much, but it's where you can really bring individuality. So rather than downloading images, bring your individuality to it. It can show your initial research interest, your references, your visual language, and your design process is far more aesthetic, more effective than a generic downloaded material. So think carefully about how you're going to communicate that. And it should be, if it's fun for you to create, it should be fun for us to look at.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yes, it gives you something that you sort of want to look at it and want to get drawn in and understand more, doesn't it, really? So the concept, and can you just explain a
Exactly.
little bit
Yeah.
more then about the research and how how you develop that side of it?
So we're looking for the most important part of the design process. Yeah, the most important part is the design process. So let's look at how you've been led to a research to experimentation. Experimentation should lead to discovery. This discovery should lead to concept development. So throughout your work, you'll be working and then you come up with a concept that's going to help you to design. So we need to be able to unpick that, hence doing a good mood or storyboard. That work can be in there. You can submit all the drawings, your initial sketches, and tell that whole story. So show us the way you've been thinking, the test, the alternatives, how decisions were made, and demonstrate genuine design development.
Okay, thank you. Taking that forward then into the sketches themselves, what sort of
So we
things again are
mentioned,
you looking
yeah,
for?
we mentioned sketches. I love sketching. So include sketches and to use as your creative thinking in action. Thinking with a pencil is how I think of sketches. So demonstrate exploration rather than certainty. So sketching can be really pleasant, even when it's not correct. It can be a rough sketch, and that shows us your options, the variations, and the evolution of an idea. The jury wants evidence that the ideas have been authentically investigated before reaching a conclusion. So go on that creative journey and show it in your sketches and show us how you've come up with that uh, conclusive idea of a product in the end.
Okay. And taking that onto the figure drawing side then as well.
So figure drawing, that can be collection figure drawing or illustration even, can show, especially for apparel, to communicate the style, proportion, silhouette, and even the attitude. So it gives the judges an understanding of how the design sits on the body. You might even want to show a body holding a bag or a foot holding or a shoe and a foot. For a shoe even. It doesn't have to just be the full figure. Also look at other people's illustrations, look at other people's figure drawings, and some have some idea of currency when doing that.
Okay, thank you. And now we're getting sort of into the more technical side of things, because sometimes I think people think design is, I think you mentioned the day, you said to me, oh, people get design and drawing confused, that they're not the same thing. So perhaps you could expand on that a little bit, because obviously you've got quite a technical looking image that we're looking at now.
Absolutely. So flats or technical drawings, technical communications are really important, especially in accessories, because it communicates construction, proportion, functionality, and feasibility. Many students underestimate the importance of technical communication. Industry doesn't. So things like bags, always best to draw them in black and white when you're illustrating and drawing. Draw them in 3/4 so we can see the volume, much the same with shoes as well. And then after, offer as one rendered. So this is a student that won last year, and she drew beautifully. But you can see that that drawing, the original drawing, is repeated more than once with more detail and also rendered. So from one good working technical drawing, you can then also build it up to be a more creative drawing. So start off with the technical sometimes and then make it more creative. It's really important.
And I suppose ultimately it feeds into this becoming the specification for the product when you actually go up into the into manufacture, because you've got the detail is already starting to be considered at this point, isn't it?
Well, often designers think that clothing also has the inside. The insides of jackets are so as important as the external part, but people tend to focus on the external part. But architects also design the inside of buildings. We also need to think about design the inside of, show us the design of the inside of the bag, perhaps, or the inside of a jacket, so we know what the pockets look like and how the lining fits. Maybe that's a lot to ask for, but have a go. It would really
Yes,
help the
it gives you the
judges.
full product. Certainly from my
Yeah.
experience in the industry of where things sometimes don't always go as you'd like them to go. I often say to people, with leather, people can't design in the problems. So I think by really having a critical overview at this point, you're preventing that from happening. I mean, that's to my mind, that's where the specification testing and the more technical aspects start to have real importance, because you're already trying to prevent a future problem, aren't you, really? Let me move you on. So
Absolutely.
materials
That's good
less.
design.
Sorry, go.
So material selection is critical component of the competition. This is where sustainability becomes tangible. Judges want transparency. Where do the materials come from? Why were they selected? How do they support your concept? So it's not just saying these are my materials. It's good to know what they are, where they came from, and how does it work with your concept. Again, it could be a few lines, a few arrows. It doesn't have to be an essay. So make it, as we can see here, make it easy to read on the page.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so alignment principles. So we've talked about research, concept, materials, design, presentation. Make sure you're hitting all the points. You're doing it all anyway within your project, but just make sure you're communicating that effectively when you submit. You'd be surprised how many students just show us a wonderful idea, but they're not aligning all the principles together and telling us the whole story. We've told you clearly what we're looking for. Make sure it's all in your project, and it's going to be easy to find and read. That's what we mean by alignment of principles.
It makes me think when you go to when you were at school and you had the exam paper, and the best piece of advice anybody gives you is read the exam question. Read
Yeah.
the question. So it's the same thing here. you've given them the criteria, work to the criteria, and then you're going to have this excellent submission, aren't you?
Yeah. Often it's good to show your project to someone else and just say, that's the
Mhm.
criteria. You read it. Can you
And just
find it in
submit
my
it. Yeah,
project? Please
yeah,
just show it
that's
to
a good
someone else.
idea, actually. I mean, I suppose even your course tutor should be able to give you guidance on, from their view, are you meeting this criteria as well, or where could you strengthen your submission if not?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so, so what about video then? Because I mean, you said in earlier that you could use video as part of your submission. So how does that work?
Well, it can be there. We like to see a little video to see, and you can talk about your skills, who you are. We can align your work with you as well. There's nothing so wonderful as a human face talking, discussing their
Hopefully.
work.
Yeah.
It's always wonderful. I interview all the students all the time. I get letters of motivation for their master's application, but I like them to talk about their motivation because I can read their face. So
Mhm.
without being rude, there's something wonderful about the human face smiling uh, and telling us about your enthusiasm about your project and how you created that and who you are, and maybe relate how it's related to your culture or whatever it is, because we're talking globally and it's a global subject.
Okay, thank you. So portfolio value. What would
Well,
you want to take that
hopefully,
a bit,
this piece
explain
of
through?
work would really, really be wonderful to have in your portfolio.
Mhm.
Um, you would like to have a variety in your portfolio of different projects you're working on. So make sure it's for a professional standard for your portfolio. Make it clear, organized, thoughtful. Make sure the presentation is up to professional standard. But having a leather project in your portfolio really aligns you well with the fashion industry, when so much of the fashion industry is driven by luxury projects like bags and shoes, which they
Mhm.
sell majority of. That's what they make their profit. Having a really good project of a quality leather item in your portfolio could actually really be a prize winner for you.
Yeah, so really, I mean, I think from that, whatever effort you put into this, it's never going to be wasted. Even if obviously they can only be sort of one winner in each section and so on, but the very fact you've gone through this process is really going to add benefit to you then in the longer term, as part of your career prospects, isn't it?
It
So
sounds
yeah,
like a cliche. It's not about winning, it's about the participation because the
it's a taking part,
participation, you,
but
you
it
will
is
learn
because
from doing
you'll
this.
learn from
Yeah.
it. Yeah, exactly. You'll learn from it and gain something from it, won't you?
Yeah.
Um, so again, you need it to be a professional standard. I think that's what you've been driving
Yeah.
at throughout this presentation so far, isn't it?
We've just mentioned there already, or so
Mm.
let's keep going.
And okay, not do much to sort of focus on negatives, but sometimes you want to give people some guidance on what they should avoid. So if you'd like to
Uh,
just go through this slide, that would might be helpful to the students.
I think generally it's the communication of it. We're not looking at bad ideas. Often we see that it's not communicated well. Weak research or little experimentation, generic ideas copied from existing products can be really embarrassing. If you
Mm.
download images of somebody's wonderful bag or a Louis Vuitton bag or a Chloe leather jacket and say that's your inspiration. We don't want to see other people's work as your inspiration. Um, we want to understand that you understand the material. So make sure you're understanding the material and that information is there. So generally avoid looking. You can look at other people's work. Absolutely should have it all in your head, but not down on the paper.
Okay, thank you. So last, just to wrap up on this first part of the webinar, I've just got a couple of things really just to say so you know how to submit or where to go. So your final advice really.
Is to be original, be authentic, be thoughtful, avoid trying to predict what the judges want. Just look at the brief. Instead, focus on creating the strongest version of your own design process, communicate it effectively, and make it authentic.
Okay, thank you. And just a couple more slides. So think of things that are challenging people, really, isn't it? It's to you want to engage, don't you? You want to engage the jury, so that they want to see your work and want to see what direction you're
Consider
heading in.
consider leather and consider why we're using it, the craftsmanship.
Mhm.
the impact it will have on the environment, a positive impact on the environment that is sustainable. So always remember that you're designing in leather, you're not designing in material.
Okay. Yes, okay. And then so there's just on this slide, obviously we've got there's a few deadlines and a few dates. And so obviously we are coming to the point for the 30th of June being the final deadline. So I know that's quite tight. Is that feasible, Adrien? That's for students if they haven't yet started to enter this competition, have they still got time to do that?
I would say, from my point of view, absolutely yes. It all comes down to good planning. You first of all spend some time looking at the project, then plan your how you're going to do this. How much time are you going to dedicate to research? How much time are you going to dedicate to experimentation? And then how much time you're going to spend to making what you decided to make. So it's design your process, design your time, design your program so it all fits in. If you know you've got 3 weeks to do something, design something that works so you can create in 3 weeks from beginning to end. It's all a question of good design. No issue if you're not started. You've probably already got a bundle of skills. At the very end, then you put the information together and create the story. You'll be creating stories as you go along, but the end result, if you've been through the whole process, the design process, the research, experimentation, you'll have all that information there, photographed all the way as you go along, and then put it together to make a great presentation for us.
So really recommend that people, start register now and get into that process. And at the very
Yeah.
worst, if you feel that it's too tight for you this year, enter next year. This is going to
Start
be an
now.
ongoing, it's a growing thing. So this could be your incentive to start planning now for your 2027 submission, so use these advice, to create basically, isn't it? Um, right, it's just got a quick stop at this point, see if there are any questions. I also, excuse me. I just think there might be a couple. Just let me see if I can. She says, "Try." Oh, sorry, I'm trying to. Got. I think I've got 3 questions. So if we can just answer these, then we'll move on to the second part of the webinar.
Yeah.
Um, First one, Adrien. Should there be a mood board if the design is based on a personal story? That's an interesting one.
Well, your personal story is still going to have to tell us what you've researched. So if you're researching a sentiment, we need to know a visualization of how you're translating that sentiment into a tangible part of something you're going to research and experiment with. So your personal story needs to be told on that mood board. Don't forget, we're also talking about the storyboard. So what you've researched and how you develop the idea all has to be part of the narrative. So as much as your personal story is personal to you, you're going to have to explain that in visuals anyway to be able to start responding to with creative ideas from your personal story. That
Okay,
should be
thank you.
working anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it should just be a given. Okay, this is another interesting one. For someone new to the leather industry, what are the most important qualities or skills to develop in order to accurately assess leather quality?
Well, I think you're going to cover some of that in the part
Yeah,
two.
the next section actually.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think that'll be pretty clear. Don't forget, we're not looking for perfection. You're not professional leather artist designers yet.
mhm.
So these are
And
things.
sometimes, I mean, it may be even just availability of the materials, Adrien. I mean, we spoke the other day, say that in a perfect world, you decide what leather you wanted, but as a student, you don't always have access to that. So how would that impact on their submission if they haven't got the leather that they particularly wanted to use, or what they
That's a
have
great.
used maybe doesn't perform in the way they're expecting it to?
Well, that's a great question, but you use what you've got available, and also that's more sustainable. But you can put a note saying, in the real world, I would like to use this and this and this leather. So nominate what you would prefer to use if you think it's better for your design, but you didn't have the availability of that leather at that time or at that price even. So
Mhm.
that can be discussed in your video or in your submission.
Okay, I've just got a couple more now. So the questions are all starting to come in. Um, what advice would you give to students interested in pursuing a career in leather design? That's quite a broad question, really, isn't it? I mean, other than
Okay.
saying go for it. Um,
Well, it depends on who you are, what you've studied, what you'd like
yeah.
to study, where you'd like to go. But if you want to work in accessories, if you've not studied accessory designs, do a master's in accessories. If you're really interested in shoes, go and study about shoes. The shoes get very technical, and
Mhm.
you could draw a shoe, but you can't design a shoe unless you've got some experience of manufacturing and understand manufacturing and prototyping in shoes because they are very specific. Bags a little bit easier. Garments, if you've just studied traditional fashion, leather garments, it's just a matter of getting some experience in cutting leather and how to
Mhm.
cut leather and which grain, which we'll be talking about later. So,
Yeah, I was just going to say because I think some of the things, obviously within products, you don't just have just leather, do you? You have all the supporting materials. So it's understanding, I mean, all of those things. But yes, so I mean, in the next few minutes, I'm going to do a little bit of a section on leather itself. There's a bit of a technical background, and yeah, why leather isn't just another textile. I mean, I remember somebody saying to me once, "Oh, I don't know why you get excited about leather. It's just a textile." And but it is and it isn't. You know, it's a material, but it doesn't behave in the same way. So it is important to have that knowledge to support your design knowledge as well, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So I'm
Um,
a little distracted. My electricity keeps cutting out, but I've
oh,
realized
sorry. Hope you can
it's not
hear.
affecting my
Okay,
signal, so that's okay. Let's
okay.
get going to the next
A few more
webinar.
yet. There's lots of questions. Sorry, there are all the
Oh,
questions coming in.
sorry.
On the basis of apparel, should it be a haute couture style only, or can it be even ready to wear style as well? So basically, within the competition,
Okay.
does it have to be haute couture?
Well, not really, because style couture is not a style. Neither is ready to wear a style. They're different areas of the market, and they have different. You should understand they have different areas of the market and different requirements to be couture or ready to wear. You have ready to wear that is highly, highly sophisticated, and probably what you're thinking is traditional red carpet, which can be ready to wear anyway. But um, I think you've got to better understand what you mean by style. There isn't a couture style and there isn't a ready-to-wear style. It's a type of manufacturing in an area of market.
It's yeah, I suppose it's your end customer, isn't it? Ultimately, to some degree, as to which way
Yeah,
which way you're going. I'm just conscious we've got quite a lot of questions suddenly coming in, so I'll just keep moving. Um, as a final year design student, I've created a leather collection. Can I use more than one of my pieces in the submission?
excellent question.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a yes and no answer. You should by all means show all of your collection, put it all in your submission and show how you've created it, but choose one as your final item. Because we can't have all of those garments arriving at the final. If you get to the very end of the final, we can't have them all because we only need one. So choose which garment for you or which outfit for you sums up your creativity and the great use of leather the way you've worked. So this is quite normal. We have a lot of students from some schools that specialize and have a specialized course in leather
Hmm.
and show us the whole thing, show us your lineup, and then choose one to focus on and tell us that story about that one and why it sums up your whole work and your ethos of design.
Okay, thank you. Another one, actually, this is quite an interesting one. It says, do we have to use cow leather for garments because sheep leather is the most comfortable leather type for garment character? Um, do you want to pick up on that from the point of view of the Leather Hides Council of America supporting the competition? So that's one of their sort
We
of key criteria.
competition, the criteria is 50% cowhide.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's
Yeah.
kind of criteria for the competition. You could say that it would be made in a different in
Mhm.
uh, bovine leather or that
Or
hide.
it could just incorporate both, couldn't it? There's no reason why you couldn't have, as long as you've got this 50% of it being bovine, which we mean by cattle.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, I think we've got to look at, see, ultimately this whole competition is supported through the Leather Hides Council of America, and predominantly, their membership base is leather made from cattle. So this is why they want to encourage, obviously, the bigger commercial side of it is to encourage students to keep buying leather and to use leather. And
yeah,
as you say, sheep has been historically used a lot in garments, but there is now, a lot more. cattle leather that is being made that is suitable for garments. And I think that's the challenge for the industry, to make things, once upon a time you would have said cattle would have gone into things like motorcycle garments, things like that. Whereas now it's much more into the fashion, and the leather can be made to have the characteristics that you need for garments, which maybe historically wasn't so easy. So
Yeah.
there's lots of reasons for bringing it in. But the criteria at the moment in the competition is, yeah, 50% cattle, but use what else. The other 50% can be a combination of things, can't it? Really, it could even be textile in conjunction with the leather. Um, okay, if a participant hasn't created a leather garment for real, but has submitted the virtual garment, or how they want to create it, will it be considered by the competition or not? Is it necessary to create an actual physical garment once you get selected as a category winner or People's Choice winner? So
Yes.
is it all based on design at the submission point, and then you go on and create the item, or is the item have to be submitted? You would know that
It's
better.
it's going to be difficult to explain your process if you've not actually physically made it.
Hmm.
So, yes, you could submit it, and then if you go on to win, then you could produce it. But it's going to be very difficult to convince the jury that you are of that quality and you understand the use of leather in particular if you actually haven't physically touched leather. Because we're talking here about how special and what different skills you maybe need to design and create in leather. Unless you've actually touched it and made something, you won't really have that knowledge, and you can have a hard time convincing us you have that
Possibly,
knowledge.
yeah.
Also, what you produce at the end might not be the same quality as that you desire because you don't have those skills. So we would really be looking at a fantasy and not a design piece.
Okay, thank you. And I think the last one says, how about complexity? If my design is simple and something that has emerged from an existing design, is it one way? Is it going to get less points? Is it going to get less, impact in the competition?
Well, if it's emerging from an existing design, it's not authentic or original. So, yes, it won't be considered. We need something creative and original to be a winner. It doesn't mean your project doesn't have value, but this project is about having creativity and newness and looking at fashion rather than just a variation of a classic.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you first of all, everybody, for sending all those questions in. Yeah, I think that's been really great to hear, and it also helps us to think about the sort of things people need to know, isn't it? Really, which sort of
Absolutely.
leads us into that's the first part of the webinar, and it's been great. If you just wanted to join us for that, and you're going to leave us, well, thank you for joining us. But we hope you'll stay on, because now we're going to sort of develop some of the ideas we've talked about into a little bit more some of the technical aspects of a bit about leather, and again, the use of leather in design. So it's going to be a little bit between the two of us again. Um, and should we get started on that? I think I'm going to pick up first. No, sorry, Adrian, you've got a few things you just want to talk through first.
Well, we know leather is one of humanity's oldest created materials, so it's ancient in origin and with endless capability of reinvention. So this is the whole point, as we mentioned just before, that we're looking at leather as being a unique material. It's probably the first thing we ever used when we were eating meat. We then took the hide and then created covering and clothing for ourselves. So one of the most ancient uh, items of clothing, footwear and clothing would have been in leather. So, and it's still a very modern material, thanks to technology and the revival of many crafts.
Okay.
So, as we mentioned before, craft shaped the culture and time and carries many memories, durability, emotion, in the way that few other materials can. We can talk about many materials, but there is nothing quite like leather.
And the fact that I think people have things, leather items, and they pass them down. That people have a very special leather handbag, for example, and pass it down to the next generation. It almost becomes, like an antique in a sense of something precious, and has an ongoing life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. When approached responsibility, leather is not only sustainable through longevity and repair, but remains a living medium through which fashion can continue to innovate uh, elevate and create lasting value. So innovate is that key word there, as we heard before from the question. Be innovative and create something new rather than just update a classic.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to look a little bit at the leather industry today. What are your sort of thoughts to sort of lead into that, Adrian?
Yeah, as we've just mentioned also before, that the fashion industry responds very well with leather. If we think about going to any airport, what do we see? Handbags and shoes made in leather, in luxury goods or from leather. Between 50 and 95% of the revenues from the top luxury brands come from the luxury area of shoes, bags, mainly in leather. So it's a really important part of the industry. And if you've got that in your portfolio, as I mentioned before, it helps you maybe to open the door for employment.
Okay, thank you. So shall I just pick up now and just have, I've just got a few slides, which is really to think about leather as a material before we start to use it in our product. And it sounds a strange thing to say, but what is leather? We all sort of think we know what it is, and when you start talking to people, it's not always that clear. So around the world, and we're obviously trading globally, we've there's various different standards organizations, various different people who look at different materials, and essentially has come up with a global definition, and it's quite long actually. When you start looking at it, it looks a little bit daunting. But if I sort of break it down into bits, because it's important to understand what we can call leather and what we can't, because especially at the moment, there are lots of alternative or new materials coming onto the marketplace. Sometimes it's because of a lifestyle choice, etc. Um, and so people need to know what it is that they're using, and they need to understand it. Have they actually got real leather as opposed to something that is maybe trying to be a synthetic material mimicking leather? So there's what we call the International Standards Organization. Everybody around the world, we work together, and we develop standards about leather in lots of different characteristics. But in this case, it's to develop the actual vocabulary. And we use lots of strange words in our industry, and we haven't got time today to just do all that. But you'll hear things like wet blue and pigmented and all sorts of strange words. So the starting point though is, let's take the outer covering of an animal. So it's, in the case of cattle, we would call it hide. For a small animal, we talk about its skin, but it's basically a continuous fibrous structure. It's a continuous material. Nature interweaves this wonderful fibrous structure, which I'm going to show you some slides in a moment. And we need it to not deteriorate. We need our products to last for a very long time. So when we talk about I'm a tanner, basically it's a process that converts that raw material so it won't putrefy. So this horrible word in here, tan, to be imputrescible, all that means is basically you take the hide, you treat it with various different tannages, and I'll talk about that, so that it's basically permanently preserved as a material. We can keep the hair or the wool on in some cases. You can see things what we call hair on hide. You can maybe be familiar with say for example, a sheepskin jacket or coat where you've got the suede and you've got the wool. But most typically we would remove the hair or the wool, and they go off into other applications. So the wool, for example, could go into the carpet industry, as the textile industry. But we can still call them leather with or without the hair. Also, we look at how thick the actual hide is. And I've got a piece here. If I can, I don't know how well you can see this. This is some what we call veg tan, and this is cattle, and it's extremely thick in its original condition. Now, if I was making this, would be suitable for making a sole leather, for example, on a shoe. But for most applications, we want leather to be thinner. So what we do is we take a band knife and we would cut horizontally into layers. So actually, for every cow, you actually suddenly have two different pieces of leather that you can make potentially. So they're still regarded as leather as long as they've been tanned. So, and again, similarly, if we cut certain areas, we can still call them leather. One other thing we do very frequently is we put a protective coating. I've got a piece now. I've got a piece of leather here. You perhaps can't see it, but if I show you the underside, can you see it's yellow on this side? And on the, just to show you how we've done it, we put a red protective coating on the top. And we want this coating for projection durability, but we don't want it to be too thick and to detract from the naturalness of the leather. So we put in a requirement as even to how thick that surface coating can be. And the maximum, and to still be called leather, is 0.15 millimeters, so 15/100ths of a millimeter. You can't measure that with your human eye. You would have to use a microscope, and that's what we would do. And actually, even this surface finish, which is so thin, is probably built up about 4 or 5 layers. So we're talking about incredibly small amounts of a finish on the surface. But it's important because we still need that to decide, is it leather? If it's not leather, what can we call it legally? Now to think about this, sometimes though we get pieces of leather that have been chopped up or leather fiber. I've got here a little example of a bit of a belt, and actually on the reverse, it's lots of little fibrous bits of leather fiber bound together with an adhesive. It has a function. It's a material we can use, but we don't call it leather because it's not a continuous structure. So it is important. We call that bonded leather fiber or leather fiberboard. It can be used, but we don't call it leather because it doesn't meet the criteria for leather. Also, we might take the top surface off. We talk about different layers. I've got here, this is a very typical gardening type glove here, which is made from a suede. We call it a suede, and it's basically the bottom part of the hide, which I'm going to come on to in a moment. So it's also important that we allow the consumer to understand what it is they've bought and where it's come from within the hide. And the most important bit, which seems a strange thing to say, because as a leather industry, we've always assumed people know that leather is of animal origin. But because of the evolution in the last few years of materials made from things like pineapple fiber, apple fiber, cactus fiber, some of these materials have been incorrectly labeled as leather, and it's not. They can't be. They are a material in their own right, but they do not perform and behave the same as leather. So within the definition, we also have to state that it has to be of animal origin to be technically leather. And there's legislation around the world now in many countries that ensure that happens. So let's have a sort of a look a little bit more. This is cattle hide. Now you can see the picture here, what you call the grain surface. Now you might all be familiar with wood, and we look at wood and we talk about wood having a grain. Well, leather has a grain, and basically, if you were to look at your own hand, for example, and look at the surface where all the hairs are, this is the same. So this is the surface of a cattle hide with the hair removed. So where you can see these little black dots as I'm moving my arrow around here, this is the hair follicles. So basically where the hairs would have come from on that animal. And every animal has a distinctly different grain surface. So we can even identify by looking at leather with a little, probably the microscope or a little lens, we can start to even work out, is it cattle leather? Is it, what other animal it might be? So that's the grain surface. And that is aesthetically very beautiful, and that is what people want in their leather. They want to see the grain surface. They want it to be as natural as possible in some cases. In other cases, they'll put a surface coating over. Now looking across this image over here, this is the thickness through a hide. So as I just showed you a moment ago, in its original condition, a cattle hide is very, very thick, and too thick for most of the purposes we want. But it's also, can you see here, these basket-like effect of fibers. Now, the cattle hide is made from a protein called collagen, and collagen is a fibrous material, and it's a wonderful material. It's really a bit like I've got a bit of rope, and if you had a rope, it's very strong and flexible, but it's made up from lots and lots of fine fibers twisted together, and then you twist those together and twist those together, and that gives you this strong, flexible end point. Now, nature does that for us with collagen protein. So leather is a fibrous material, and these fibers have been developed over time, and they interweave in 3 dimensions. So this is where, again, leather differs from a textile, and we've now got a 3 dimensional structure. Lots of benefits from that. One, it's very flexible. Two, it's very strong, but it also allows things like moisture to pass through. We can allow, if you imagine a sports shoe and you may be running and you've got hot feet, the perspiration from your feet can move through this fibrous structure and back out into the atmosphere. And why leather is such a comfortable material for your foot health and for your from having leather footwear. But another characteristic which people like leather in their footwear is these fibers will accommodate the shape of your foot. So they'll move and they'll flex. And this is why your shoes, when they're first new, may be a little bit uncomfortable. But over a short time, they actually take on the shape of your foot. And then they're really, really, really comfortable. So we talk about leather being breathable, which is that moisture. We talk about leather being moldable, which is, again, this ability to shape. Now, the downside to that is if you happen to be a leather chair and you happen to have somebody quite heavy sitting on you, that leather will also take on the shape of somebody's bottom. So it's a characteristic within the fiber structure. It can be viewed as generally positive, sometimes not so much. So important. So this natural fiber structure is really what makes leather very unique, and lots of synthetic materials try to mimic it and don't manage to. But as I said before, this leather is too thick for most of our purposes. Now, the very top, probably 20 to 30% of the thickness is what we call the grain layer. Can you see here? It's quite dense looking, quite compact. And essentially the hairs would come in here. On its own, this layer would be very weak. It's only very, very fine fibers of collagen. And there's lots of other things happening that controls the thermostatic, the life of the hide in use would be to keep the animal cool and so forth. So there's lots of things of thermal control in this top layer. We don't want just the grain surface on its own. It would be weak. If we look down here, there's a strange name called the corium. Well, probably 70 to 80% of this hide is made up of this corium layer, which is lots and lots of these really strong fiber bundles woven together. Is incredibly strong. And that's where the most of the strength of leather comes from. But if we were to split this leather into layers, we were typically going to split it around about this midpoint here. And what we need is to make sure we've got plenty of this corium layer, at least as much as the thickness of the grain layer, so that we retain the strength in our leather. If we split, the bottom layer is all fibrous, and that's what we would typically make our suede from. So that's essentially where we get the different layers being used for different leathers. At the very bottom, we remove the very bottom of the hide because it's the part that of the covering, outer covering of the hide that was in contact with the animal. So it can be a little bit fatty and so forth. So we would remove that. Thinking now again about this fibrous structure we have in a hide, it's not even uniform throughout the whole of an animal. So this is where it's really important from the design and cutting. And when somebody was talking earlier about the quality, how can we assess the quality? It's about understanding the leather that you're working with and knowing how it will behave in different areas. So I've got here a picture of a full hide. If you can see down the middle here, this is the backbone of the animal. This is the neck. This would be where the tail was. And this is the backbone down the middle. So this was the outer covering as it was wrapped around the animal. So when it's lying flat like this, what we've actually got is an area down here, which we call the belly, and over here, which we call the belly. And that's quite thin and stretchy. If you think about cattle, and cattle have something like 4 stomachs. So when you have a big meal, you know, your belly stretches to accommodate the meal. And it's the same here. So what we find is the fibers in this area and this area are very thin and stretchy. So when we're cutting, we need to give consideration to that. It doesn't mean we can't use it, but you've got to think about your product and the design of your product. Where would be suitable to cut components for that part of the hide? Now, there's an odd word here called axilla. Basically, we've got 4 little pockets around here, here and here. And this is like the armpit or the leg pit of the animal. And the skin there has to be really flexible and stretchy, because if you think about when you're in moving, you think about your own arms and things, that skin under your arm is very, very flexible. So we have this area called axilla, and sometimes we can use it, sometimes we can't. So it depends on how loose it is. But we've got up here the neck and the neck area, the shoulder area. Here we've got a really, really thick, concentrated fiber structure, and it's very, very strong. But an animal is flexing all day, it's grazing, and we sometimes see, if you look at your own knuckles, if you flex them, you'll see creases where you're flexing. So we do get these lines that run across that area on the hide. Personally, I think they're beautiful. Some people regard them as a defect. I don't know why, because it's just a part of the natural character of the leather. And I think we've got people to expect this is part of the uniqueness as well that you don't get with a synthetic. So you've got a very thick area here. So now I've got this sort of imaginary rectangle in the center of my hide, which just sort of starts from the shoulder and goes down to the sort of the tail area. We call that the butt. Adrien said to me one day, "Oh yeah, but is best, isn't it?" You know, we all want butt. I said, "Well, we all want butt because it's the most uniform part of the hide. It's very, very tightly woven. It's very dense. It's a very nice tight fiber structure, so great for lots of different characteristics." And we would use it in our prime panels. So if it was a jacket, for example, you'd use it on the front panels where it's really obvious. On a handbag, you'd use it on your main panels, you know, where your flap is, for example. If it was in footwear, we would use it on the upper. And we have to also consider stretch, because an animal doesn't stretch uniformly. We get more stretch from belly to belly going across here than we do from neck to tail. So when we're cutting, we also need to make sure we cut our components in the right direction to thinking about the stretch in there. I was once working with an automotive company, and they were making for a long strip for a dashboard. They were making 2 strips of leather. And what they did is they cut one strip in this direction, parallel to the backbone, and they cut one strip perpendicular to the backbone across the belly to belly. And as they sewed them up, they gradually changed shape, and the whole thing became distorted because one strip stretched more than the other. So it's really important to understand the structure of a hide when you're thinking about your components and your design and your final end product. And we try to use as much as possible because leather is expensive, so we've got to think carefully. From, you know, we don't want to be producing leather to then throw it away. So the cutting procedure and operation is very, very critical, and commercially can make or break a manufacturer. So that's the thing. The hide itself, as I said before, we want to tan it so it doesn't putrefy, essentially. Now, historically, we would have used, this is veg tan, what we call vegetable tan. It would have been plant-based material, seeds, nuts, bark. We still make a lot of leather that is vegetable tanned, probably 15 to 20% of all leather. Great for making things like structured bags, where you've got, it tends to be quite firm and hold a shape. Great for molding, great for embossing a print on, lots of benefits to that. But you do have this underlying brown colour of some sorts, and so not always so good for when you want to do bright dyes and bright colours, etc. But about 150 years ago, most leather became blue. This is an example of what we call a chrome tan leather. Very good for heat stability, very good for strength and flexibility. And probably 70 to 80% of all leather will be made from a chrome tan, even nowadays. But we also now, and you might have heard the word wet blue. We tend to trade around the world in a sort of a tanned state, and we call it wet blue. But nowadays we're also making more emphasis on leathers that can be easily biodegraded or composted. We're very good at making leather. If you go for an archaeological dig, you can dig up Roman sandals that are 2,000 years old, 3,000 years old, and still, you know, they're still intact as footwear. So a lot of emphasis on the environmental side, the sustainability side at the moment, is creating tannages which can actually be composted or biodegrade in different circumstances. So you'll now see a lot more innovative tannages coming through, and you might hear the term wet white as well. That's another typical description. So tanning is the point hide becomes leather. So absolutely fundamental to the process. But of course, as a fashion industry, we want colour, and people often get confused by colour because we tend to use two different forms of coloration in making leather. We use dyes and we use pigments. And as you can see from the two pictures I've got here, a dye is a coloration that is transparent. It gives visibility to anything going on beneath it. So we will colour the fibres of the leather with dye, typically. But if we put a surface coating on and we want to have a protective coating with colour in it, then we use pigment, and pigment has an opaque effect, a covering effect. So as you can see on this picture here, this is dye where you can see through, you have the transparency. If a leather is dyed only, and some leathers are only dyed, so you might have suedes, you might have nubucks, you might have aniline, where by definition you don't use any pigment, those leathers are very natural looking, but they also sometimes can highlight any scars and scratches and things. If you've got a leather, maybe the surface is a little more damaged, you might put a pigmented finish on, and actually then the surface becomes very uniform, very equal colour. When we start thinking about how leather behaves in use, sometimes if someone's had a problem, they might say, all the colours coming off of a product, the dye's coming off. It isn't necessarily the case. Sometimes a pigment finish might crack, might peel. So we've got to be clear on where the colour comes from. But it is very easy for people to get those two things confused, I have to say. And then we come on to the sort of final end, the creative end. The leather is aesthetically a beautiful material, and people love the feel, they love the look. And basically, this is where in the tannery, the tanners need to work very closely with the design people. We need to work closely with the manufacturers, because they're going to produce a leather that meets the final product's aesthetics. And there's so many things we can do. I mean, this is just there's some red leather here, which is, you can see how it drapes. It's beautiful. This is cattle leather. So it shows you nowadays that you can make garment leather that is beautifully soft and flexible. The picture over here, this is showing you leather that's got a digital image on it. So there's no end to the creativity that can be imparted into the leather really at this point. So this is what we call the finishing end of the process, and I say it's very critical. Then the tannery understands what the final leather needs to be like and achieve, and so forth. So they work together closely with the design teams, where possible. And of course, leather ultimately ends up in a product, goes into the marketplace, and sometimes, sadly, things go wrong. So what's really also important is that we assess leather, we test it, we come to agreed specification of what its technical aspects should be. So on this picture here, this was my briefcase, as you can see, and this panel, which is torn after a very, very limited time using the bag, actually, had got the strap attached to it. So you imagine a briefcase that has a laptop in it. There's a lot of weight, a huge amount of weight on that point here. And the problem was this panel was cut from the belly area. So I said to you earlier, the belly area can be very thin and very stretchy. Very often it's okay to use, in a gusset panel on a product. But because this was a load-bearing panel, it wasn't strong enough, and the reinforcement, the attachment here is actually not a very good attachment, and all the weight from the bag was on this small panel here. So performance and assessment and considering what the technicalities are you want from your leather are also really, really important, because your product has to have this long life that we want it to. And so this is a way of assessing and making sure when you buy your leather and use your leather that it will meet the technical requirements. So just to sort of wrap up my bit, and then I'm going to pass back to Adrien to talk a bit more about the design side. What I say here, perfect planning prevents poor products. Thinking about all those different aspects, thinking about all the understand the raw material, understand the fibre structure, understand how the different parts of the hide are, think about how you're going to colour it, think about how you're going to treat it, think about the aesthetics of it. If you put all those things in place, that leather should give you the perfect product. That's what we're all aspiring to do. Thank you. That's my bit over. Um, Adrien, can I just pass back onto you now for your how you're going to take my leather and use it in your design?
Well, I love the statement perfect planning. Perfect planning also creates excellent design. So it's all about planning. So from craft culture from craft to luxury culture, this is very important for us in leather. Leather has always occupied a special place within luxury culture. Its value extends beyond the function. We talked a lot about the function, but it also communicates craft, quality, heritage, emotional attachment. So we know that throughout history, it's always been connected to luxury. And it's important to understand the product culture. Before designing a product, understand the culture surrounding it. Who uses it? Why does it exist? What does it communicate? What role does it play in people's lives? So here we see an image of a mask, a diving mask from Buonaldo. So don't limit your research to fashion. Explore leather interiors, automotive design, cars and aircraft seats are still made from leather. Sport, furniture, craft tradition, innovation comes from unexpected places. So look around different craft culture and also learn through observation. The strongest designers are often the strongest observers. That's the next slide.
Thank you.
So pay attention to detail, materials, construction, function, craftsmanship, culture, and observation creates understanding. So look around and look at craft culture and the culture of leather generally. And next slide, we're talking about researching the past. Understand what has already been done helps you to define originality. So if we don't know the history, we can't really understand what is original, what will be new today. So history, look at history. It's not something to copy. It's something to learn from and to understand innovation. If I was, for example, creating a jacket, and that was what I wanted to create for the project, I would also go back looking at jackets from military, jackets from workwear that were created by its nature, had to be created in leather. Then I would look at perhaps the 1980s jackets of Claude Montana or the 1990s and early 2000 jackets of Azedine Alaya. So look at fashion if you're looking at jackets, perhaps look at it, put it away. Don't put it on a mood board. It's somebody else's design, unless it's something historical or something from a different era or a different sector. So a traditional flying jacket could actually be part of your research. So then again, we look at the product landscape at the next slide. So look at contemporary products, understand the luxury brand, emerging designers, and independent makers as well. Look at craft practitioners, study the market to understand what opportunities exist. So put that in a different part of research. Keep the product in a different part of research to help you understand the world of leather and the products that exist today. My advice would be on the next slide to start with one category. Often we make the mistake of trying to design everything. So let's focus on one category if we've not already started the project. So choose one. Understand deeply before attempting to innovate. Depth is more valuable than breadth. So understand the research you're going to do, understand the product area you're going to work with. That's would be key if you're starting afresh. Next slide, please. So understand, don't copy. Research is not about collecting images. Research is about understanding. The goal is not to replicate. The goal is to create a new insight, a new idea. So choose well your creative entry point. That can be anything. Enjoy, every project needs a starting point, and enjoy your starting point. Here I'm obviously showing you a tree trunk and saying this could be a creative area to start investigating. That's just an example. Make it meaningful, make cultural references, craft processes, natural structures, a social issue, or a key focus area. Anything you choose can become meaningful research. Next slide. Let's look at that. So you could take that tree trunk and then experiment with ideas in your sketchbook. Depth creates originality. Originality really rarely appears instantly. It develops through investigation. So by playing in your sketchbook, investing ideas, you might find some newness to take into your concept. And here we see some examples. This is from Modetech, Indiana. I found this laser cut leather that resembled lace. So I can imagine that perhaps somebody researched into traditional lace before creating this laser cut idea. And let's continue. And here's some other things I found at Modateca where there was this very 1970s looking hide that had been cut into interlocking, almost jigsaw-like elements to create a garment. Leather cut in small pieces, which you could use small pieces of leftover leather to create sequins, paillettes. And then also leather can be knitted. I found lots of really interesting knitted leather garments can be really quite interesting. So look how leather can be tested to be reinvented and experiment with leather so it becomes totally new for you. Next slide. So record the processes, but experiment in depth with your experimentation. That's another thing I found with embossing. Testing, prototyping, and design development is important, and record everything. More students' work, so you can see it's important to record everything in your sketchbooks, the way you're experimenting, as well as how your ideas are developing. So, as I was saying, record the process. This was a winner from last year. So the observation of sketches, research, and complete the narrative in the story so we can read every page with a complete narrative will help us to understand the process you've been working on. This is a piece of work that a student did. He showed his experimentation. I photographed it from above. So remember, you could put all your work out on a table like this and photograph the books and show us how your complete narrative of how you created your original design ideas. So, final advice, be creative, stay curious, remain original, choose leather thoughtfully and responsibly. So back to Q&A again.
Okay, I think just give me a second. I think we've got, I could see, oh, sorry, I'm just trying to get my mouse in the right place. Okay, we've got quite a few questions that have come in here. So let's have a look. Right, I'm just going to see where we got up to before. To see if there's any extra ones. Okay. Yes, I actually there's only one additional one in here, and I think there might be something in the chat. It says, "Is all of the garment? Okay, should all of the garment be in leather, or is it possible to combine with other fabrics, etc.? If you're going back to the competition here, I think we're talking about in the submission. Has it got to be completely leather, or is it possible to use other fabrics in the collection?"
Well, according to regulations, it's 50% leather. So let's say 50%. So we need the leather really to be the main part of the story.
And then the rest of it can be up to your imagination then, really.
However, I would say let's try and keep it natural, because if we're using leather, and also think about what works with leather. Only certain materials would respond well to leather. Traditionally, strangely enough, you see a lot of knitwear with leather or crochet with leather, where you have leather patches and then it's crocheted together or knitted together. So look at historically how things, fabrics are put or combined with leather for leather garments.
Okay, Yes, thank you. And the only other thing, I just looked in the chat, and there was somebody, a lady called Joyce, was saying thank you for the presentation. So thank you, Joyce, and thank you for everybody who's
Thank
been
you.
has been joining us. Oh, actually, sorry, I think there's a few more questions to go. This is what happens, you see. As soon as you start, I think we've got a couple more coming in now. So we'll just have a look and see if there's anybody. Okay, yes, so there's a couple more questions. What about presentation skills? Will we be judged on our public speaking and videos if we make it, or is it all about the design? Ah, that's a good question.
Ah, well,
Mm,
it's all about the process, not even just the design. So
mm,
you're not being judged on your communication, your visual communication skills, but if you don't communicate your ideas well and the processes you've gone through, how can we judge it well? So this is why I've spent so much time talking about the mood boards, your sketches, your technical drawings to support you in making good visual communication. Now, I was there for the last 2 years when the students have been presenting, their finalists have been presenting their work, and nobody had an issue in describing their work. The key to that is create, like us, create a good PowerPoint to help support your conversation, make yourself some good notes. You can present in your own language if you wish when you're doing it live to us, and we can have someone translating if we have
yes.
to. But but we respect you having an attempt at doing it in English if you can. But for the live, if you get through to the live final, um, you have an opportunity to present in whatever language, as well as I saw last year, that was necessary. However, yes, however, I think all but one presented in English last year. It's not a test of
Yeah,
your presentation skills, but
no.
as a designer, we have to learn to present visually
Yeah, I
and
mean, you have to,
verbally as
like you
well.
say,
It's part of our
communication
job.
is essential, isn't it? But throughout
Yeah.
life, let's be honest, the more you can communicate clearly, the simpler life becomes generally, doesn't it? In all aspects. Right, I've got one last question, which I think is going to be one for me, actually. Oh no, there's another one coming. This is, well, this is interesting. First of all, it says, how do we find a real vegan leather? So first of all, I'm going to pick up on that. How does the texture look in terms of cactus leather, cork leather, and vegetable tanned leather? How has it been originated? So there's lots of questions in there. Um, to come back to my point a little while ago, first of all, there isn't such a thing as vegan leather. There are vegan materials, and perfectly acceptable if that's your lifestyle choice to be vegan. Um, but they shouldn't be described as leather because they're not of our animal origin. So these materials exist, and I just happen to have with me, because it then says about what does it look like and so forth. Now I've got three. I don't know how well you can see these. I don't know if I should wear them. Bow ties. Okay. One is she says doing this. This one is made from a material called Pinatex, which is a cactus fiber material. Not cactus fiber, sorry, pineapple fiber material. Got it the wrong way around. This one is made from the cactus fiber material, and this one is proper leather made from cattle hide. And okay, in a product they might look quite similar. What we find is the majority of these things, like the pineapple, like the apple, like the cactus, are basically a polyurethane based material with some fiber from that particular product in it. So they're really, if I'm being quite blunt, they're really plastic based materials. And probably there's been a lot of research. There's an organization called Filk in Germany who've done a great study. Anybody who's interested in this, it's publicly on their website, all about the different alternative materials. And they've done an assessment of them versus leather. And it's publicly available. And it looks at things like tear strength. It looks at things like how well they flex. Are they likely to crack? There's all sorts of things. So if anybody wants that information, they can drop us an email and I can sort of point in the right direction. But critically, from my point of view, they're not leather. They are an alternative material that some people choose to use. But generally speaking, most of the research shows that they don't perform in the same way as leather, and they don't perform as well as leather. So that's trying to give the plug for leather. Vegetable tan leather is completely different. That is leather, and it has been just the vegetable bit is the tannage. It doesn't mean that they've been made from carrots or peas or something. It literally means the tannage I think I said to you the other day, Adrian, if do you like drinking red wine? Anybody who, or drink tea, lots of us are tea drinkers around the world. If you drink a cup of tea and you look in your cup, you often see a brown stain, don't you? That gets left after the tea, you drunk the tea. That is because of the tannins in the tea leaves. So in theory, you could take a piece of hide, drop it in your cup of tea, come back in a year, and you've made leather. Because that's the really sort of simplistic view of it. So plant materials contain natural tannins. And I said red wine is another one where we can have a very high tannin content. So you could actually make leather from red wine, but it would be such a waste, wouldn't it? So I'll stick with the tea. So vegetable tanning is leather. The apple, the pineapple, the cactus, they're not. That's probably the best at the moment on that one. So I've got one more question. This is regarding shoe design. Basically, all shoe design rotates around the traditional designs, such as Derby, Oxford, and moccasins. So, is there any specific requirements? That's an interesting one. Because you're not just copying a design still, are you? But it's a
Well,
type of
there are
shoe.
lots of designers that create new shapes. So
Mhm.
please do some research and look at new shapes. We've have entries that do create new shapes. I think you're talking about the last shapes often revolve around those traditional shapes, but you can go beyond that, create shapes that are
Mhm.
non-traditional.
And you can
Alexander
still
Mach
take a traditional men's shoe, but the innovation might come in within the type of leather you use or the styling of the accessories. Or I mean, there's still ways to take a basic shoe, isn't there? That is
I would no, I would take
no.
liberty with it. We're not
Okay.
here to we're not here to decorate a basic shoe. You can start off with a basic last style
Style.
and cut it and manipulate the leather to create a
Mhm.
new shape, a new function, a new way
Okay.
of work. So let's not go decorating a traditional
No.
shoe.
Okay. Yeah.
I was
I'm
going to
trying to sort of think
mention,
using the wrong terminology probably. Um.
could I mention the
Yeah.
armadillo shoe of Alexander McQueen?
Oh
So
wow.
if you don't know that shoe or the origins of that shoe, take a look because if you're designing shoes and you don't know that shoe, well, you have a
Mhm.
problem. So have a look at creative designers and what shoes they create and how they go beyond the traditional shoe.
Okay. Thank you. Right. I stand corrected on that one. Hence why I'm the leather person and
We have our
you're the design
roles.
person. This is it. This is why we work together so well. Um, okay, I think now that literally is all of the questions. I'm conscious. Oh no, somebody else has just popped one in. Oh, every time I think I'm finished. Um, if the quality of the okay, if the quality of the leather has been torn or damaged, how does it get repaired or treated? That's an interesting one. Can I just sort of step in a little bit? A lot depends on the type of leather you've got as to how easy it is to do a repair. For example, a leather with a surface coating, it gets, let's just say it gets scuffed or scratched or something. It is quite relatively easy to create a new finish. Rather, if you imagine a car and you scratch the paintwork on your car, you have people who are experts in matching that color and refinishing. And we can do the same in leather terms if the surface has been damaged in some way, depending on whether it's a very natural surface or whether it's a surface with a finish on it. And again, you see people who have got the expertise in literally taking leather as torn and can put some supporting material underneath, and then they can rebuild up the finish on the top. So again, it's like everybody, you've got people who've got very skilled in these things. Shoe repair, I mean, shoe repairers have been in existence for probably as long as shoes have. And so there are many things that you can do. Probably not everything, but no, that is definitely one of the benefits that we can look at items and repair them if the leather has become damaged. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Adrian.
No, I think that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. I've got one question here that says, is leather biodegradable or specifically vegetable tan leather biodegradable? That's a big question because actually people assume because veg tan is from a plant material that it's going to be more biodegradable than chrome tan. That's not necessarily the case at all because of all the other things that we use in there. Um, I say we've as an industry we've been so good at making a product that lasts forever. Um, we're almost having to reverse the process now and create leathers that are intentionally biodegradable. We obviously don't want them to biodegrade in use. We want to be able to have the lifetime of that product without any deterioration. But yeah, so there are specific ways now that we can create leathers that are, and there's lots of testing that goes on. So you can't assume all leather will instantly be biodegradable in the short term. Longer term, maybe, but we've got to look at realistically. A lot of the research in leather at the moment is how we can make it more easily at the end of its life biodegraded.
I've just got a question to add to that.
Hmm.
Why are we looking to make things biodegradable if they're not going to be pollutant? The issue with things being biodegradable is to make
Hmm.
sure they're not polluting.
Yeah, yeah,
Is leather, but if it is biodegradable leather, how pollutant is it compared to a synthetic?
yeah. That's a good question, actually. And I think a lot of things. Um, it's I think it's a subject of just things that just end up in landfill and just being there for a very long time, and so there is a sort of shift towards of not having that situation. And I think probably, I mean, it says this is a huge, this is probably a topic for a separate webinar, I think, because it's a huge
Yeah,
topic. And
sustainability.
because also when you think about a handbag of footwear particularly, it's so many different components. It's not just the leather. I mean, the leather is probably one of the simplest parts of a shoe. When you start looking at the soling materials, looking at some of the other things, and actually the disassembly of a product at the end of its life, because you don't want to put, the landfill is so full of shoes around the world, it's horrendous. And the technology is now moving towards how you can take products apart at the end of life, what you can reuse. If you've got a rubber sole, for example, maybe you can recycle that, reuse the leather. So it is actually now actually designing for the end of life of a product is becoming quite critical. So it's not just about making something that's wonderful for the user, it's actually making something that has the full circularity and that says, okay, we're starting from here, and by the time we finish, we're back here. And so I think really it's a topic we should have as a separate webinar. But yeah, it's really important, I think, we consider all these things. Um, there's one last question here. How do you identify real leather versus fake leather before purchasing it? Hmm, that is a very good question, because this is partly why we have so much legislation in the world in terms of labeling, because people do get quite easily misled. And I will admit myself, I've been 40 years as a tanner, and I once bought a pair of shoes, and I bought them in a hurry, put them on, yeah, they're leather. And when I got home, I realized that the inside sock, the lining, was leather, but not the shoe. And they'd put the leather symbol, the leather mark on and it misled me into, as soon as I looked at them properly, I realized it wasn't. But it is very difficult, and there are some extremely good synthetic materials that look like leather. So I think a lot of it comes down to, first of all, for me, I always like to try and find a cut edge, because I like to look at the fibers, but you don't always get that on a product. Um, Sometimes it's just instinctive that you just sort of, this doesn't feel right. But really, I think you've got to be buying your products as well from um, reputable retailers, reputable manufacturers who get their labeling correct and make sure that and ask the questions. When you're buying something, ask the questions in that retail outlet and see what they know about what they're selling, because sometimes that their lack of knowledge can be a little bit scary, but they ought to know, as a brand should always know what is in their product. So that's the best advice I give, because it's not something you can just sort of teach somebody instantly. But I appreciate that a lot of people do get misled. And legislation is there to protect you, consumer legislation, for that very reason. I've got a few things in the chat now just coming up. Let me just have a look if there's uh, anything there that I just wanted to see. Okay, so we've got just some nice comments. Thank you from people. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Answering my questions. Yeah, lovely, brilliant. Oh, smell is. I used to sometimes smell. Oh, the smell helps. Okay, yeah. You know what? I agree with you on that one. I love the smell of leather, but you can even buy synthetic smell, leather smell. And some people who actually make a product that's synthetic will spray it to make it smell like leather. How difficult is that? But yeah. Um, I'm probably lost my sense of smell for leather now because I've been surrounded by it. But anyway, I think really, so thank you for your lovely comments. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you joining us. We appreciate this has been a long session and that you're still with us. It will be made available. We're recording this, as far as I'm aware, it's still recording, and we will put it on the Real Leather Stay Different website. So give us a day or so to just to get that sorted. And if any of your colleagues weren't able to join us today but would like to, then you'll be able to go back and watch it again. So with that, thank you, Adrien. We've enjoyed being with you, and we hope you found this useful. And we look forward to seeing all your submissions, don't we?
We do. And have a good weekend.
Have a
It's
great
Friday.
weekend. Yeah, have a great weekend. We will hope to meet you again. We will be doing some more of
Yeah.
these. That's the intention. And I say any suggestions of topics you want to cover, that's also useful to us. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye bye.